Good morning. It's great to see you all. Welcome to this weekly series. My name is Jorge Silva-Puras. I'm the Dean at the CUNY School of Professional Studies. And today we have a very, very special episode of our interview series. We have Dr. Susan Coe and Dr. Olina Satko, who are joining us today to talk about their most recent book, their most recent collaboration, and the topic that I think all of you will be interested in learning about, which is the mentoring online or online mentoring and what it means, how it works, how does it differ or differentiate from the in-person mentoring. So we're going to have a really, really nice discussion. So before we get started, of course, I always like to get a little bit of a backstory, background on how both of you became interested in higher education and specifically the online teaching and learning space. So why don't we start with Susan? So this, Susan, thanks again for joining us.
Thank you for having us. Well, I'm going to give the short version because it's a long story. But online education specifically, I got involved with, started teaching online actually in 1996. And then in 1997, 98, I got involved with helping to create some of the courses in one of the first online teacher training programs for UCLA Extension at that time. I'm going to skip ahead. I was the director, founding director of the Office of Faculty Development and Instructional Technology at CUNY SBS. And and when I was there in early 2012, we piloted what's now the Faculty Peer Mentoring Program. So that's a short version of some of my involvement with online teaching, and uh, also some of you may be familiar with my book, Teaching Online: A Practical Guide, which has gone through 4 editions starting in 2000.
Yes.
And Elena, I'm going to pass on to Elena. She's going to add something
Excellent.
about that.
Excellent. Thank you, Susan.
Great. Thank you so much, Susan. And I'll mention that actually I heard of Dr. Susan Coe while I was pursuing my PhD in teaching and learning and educational technology back in the day. And I actually read her book in the 3rd edition while working on my dissertation. And I was so impressed, and I was her big fan. And then fast forward a few years later, I came to New York. I was working at New York Institute of Technology at their Center for Teaching and Learning and advancing online teaching and learning and teaching in person as well. And then I came to Lehman College as the director of the Office of Online Education. And I was looking forward to an opportunity to meet Susan. And several years later, she and I ended up collaborating. We wrote a couple of books. One is an open educational resources called Best Practices in Designing Courses with Open Educational Resources. And then our second book is actually based on our work together here at Lehman. We started a mentoring program for faculty in the pandemic, which was a perfect opportunity for us. And then also we have launched a mentoring program for our online students that we've been running for a couple of years as well. And as a result of that work, as well as our research in the US with many other institutions, we ended up working on our most recent mentoring book, and our next step is actually I'm really grateful to be invited to co-write the 5th edition of Susan's Best Practices for Teaching Online handbook. So check out the link that's just popped up. Susan is a series editor for Routledge for their Best Practices is in Online Teaching and Learning series, and you'll see a number of books that she has shaped.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And let's get started with a few of the questions we have prepared for you. And of course, for the audience, those of you who are watching, if you have any questions, any comments for either Susan or Olina, please include them in the comments section and we'll do our best to try to address them. But let me start with Olina. And this question has to do with online mentoring. and specifically, what special considerations should be highlighted in terms of what is the difference between an online mentoring experience and a more traditional offline or in-person mentoring? You're on mute.
That's a really good question. Thank you so much, George. So first of all, we know that when the majority of mentoring takes place online, those specific competencies of a mentor and mentee to communicate online really come to the fore, right? Mm-hmm. So it really builds on the characteristics noted on what is good mentoring, no matter the modality, but really the additional special qualities that mentors and mentees need to possess in order to effectively communicate online are really important. So what are some of those special skills? So first of all, as we know, online mentors need to be respected by their peers. They need to be congenial and patient, right? They need to be comfortable using technology and communicating online fluently, right? Be able to troubleshoot. If something doesn't go wrong, they should be able to quickly pivot and assist their mentee as well. They need to be able to adjust to different online modalities. We know that online modalities have taken different shapes and forms, especially after the pandemic. And so being able to quickly adjust to a variety of technology, but also to a variety of modalities is important. And also, it really is important for online mentors to be aware of the mentee's environment and circumstances, right? And when we're not in the same room, when we're online, we really have to be aware of the subtle communication in the online space, right? And so I think that's probably sums it up well, but also one key point for online mentoring specifically is the importance of regular contact with mentees and managing expectations, right? It's something that, in the in-person mentoring setting, you don't really have to think about it, just like the in-person teaching. But here in the online setting, you really have to have some structure and really have some common understanding that is established between the mentor and the mentee.
What I find fascinating as well is that the online mentoring literally opens the world to you in terms of possibilities to find mentors, or for you as a mentee to find those connections anywhere in the world. So exactly. It really does extend the audience significantly. So thanks for sharing that. And now, Susan, I want to pivot slightly. How should we plan for online faculty and student mentoring? What should those plans require that might be different from what we do in the in-person space?
Well, even in person, I think that you do need to define what you mean by mentoring, because it can be a general term and people have different ideas of what it means. So you're going to need to define the program and the meaning of mentoring within that program. Who's going to be participating? So, for example, is this something that's going to be offered to faculty who are just entering online teaching? And so it's in a way part of their initial training. Or is it something that's going to happen throughout their time as faculty, like a one-to-many, where it's an on-demand service? With students, it even can involve things, like career mentoring. And what you just mentioned about online is it's really great, because you could bring in people from the work world that might not otherwise be able to participate as mentors. Next, what are the overall goals? What are the needs and the goals for the mentoring program at your institution? If you can't define those goals, it's going to be hard to sell that program to all the potential stakeholders. You have to find an appropriate program structure that's going to meet the needs, but also the resources and even the culture of the institution. Then, very important, as all administrators know, what is the best home for that program? somebody,
Mhm.
who's going to be running it and facilitating it. How is it going to be funded? So the home is going to be based on the support, the funding, the staff, the resources, and what seems logical for some of the goals, perhaps as well.
And typically, where typically, based on what you have seen, what is the right home?
Well,
Presuming
that
that they
really
have the resources.
Yeah, that's going to depend on the institution. Like, for example, it could be an Office of Online Ed. It could be a
Hmm.
faculty development office, could be a Center for Teaching and Learning. With students, it could be one of the various groups under student advising or student services. So I think it really depends on, how is the program structured and what are its goals. Then you're going to find a logical home for it.
Okay.
But there has to be resources available, right? Staff,
Hmm.
funding,
Hmm.
so that's his consideration as well. Designating somebody to coordinate, to either set up or support, and finally assess. So thinking about, how is it going to be run? And finally, involving other stakeholders. This is so important because very few institutions have endless resources.
Yeah.
So identifying stakeholders and who have the relevant experience and expertise is really important. And depending on the institution, these could be found in different areas, like in instructional technology or advising. I mean, there's just it really depends on the institutional context.
Now let me ask a slightly different question. I had not planned for this one, but maybe you can provide some perspective. As you were talking about the opportunities of online mentoring, I thought, well, if I'm a freshly minted member of the faculty or just starting, I do need that mentoring. Apart from what I could find in my own university, any thoughts, any suggestions as to where and how to find mentors?
Outside, Elena can speak to that.
Sure. Yeah. So, and that's a great question, So I think, especially not just for the faculty, I think for faculty, it's specifically, oftentimes we go through our discipline, and that's where maybe we find somebody that, like for me, Susan was a mentor, right? Even
Hmm.
before she knew that.
Yep.
It was, I found her because I read her book, and then I followed her research and her work, and then once we've established that personal contact and started to build that relationship, she became my, more of a formal mentor. But there are also organizations for those of us in the online space. There are a couple of organizations that offer online mentoring opportunities. For example, I mentioned that Online Learning Consortium, they have a certificate program that prepares faculty and instructional designers, and part of that experience is
Hmm.
actually mentoring by one of the OLC facilitators. I actually served in that role for a few years and continue to serve in that role. And then also another organization is EDUCAUSE, right? So we know
Hmm.
EDUCAUSE, and EDUCAUSE a few years ago established a series, well, actually a few types of mentoring programs. There's one mentoring program that specifically focuses on instructional designers. It's one-to-one, ID to ID, but then they also have a what we call network mentoring, or one-to-many. So what that is actually is, it's a network of professionals. And I
Hmm.
would just go to EDUCAUSE mentoring, and anybody who is a member of EDUCAUSE, for example, Lehman is an institutional member, and you could actually note that you're interested in mentoring others, or that you're looking for a mentor. And through that network, I served as a mentor to several of my colleagues. And as we know, in mentor-mentee relationship, it's not just one way.
Hmm.
Really an exchange, right? So there are certain benefits for both mentors and mentees in that relationship. So it's a fantastic and a rewarding experience to do that. When it comes to faculty, I think We also have a faculty mentoring program at Lehman, but that specifically focuses on new faculty, which is different from our online mentoring program that helps faculty advance their skills in online teaching and learning.
Fantastic. And I'm putting the sharing my screen with the websites of EduCause and the online consortium. One thing if we have time, I'd love to share is that that article that you recently published in EduCause regarding online mentoring. But we'll get to that momentarily. So thank you so much for that answer. Now, moving on to the next question I had is, what are the main recommendations that you have for effective asynchronous versus synchronous mentoring, both for faculty and students?
And thank you. This is such a terrific question. As we have seen, online learning has traditionally been asynchronous. And in the few recent years, we have discovered, some of the potential benefits of synchronous, right, interaction. And so, of course, for mentoring, a couple of things come to mind. So when it comes to asynchronous, let me start with that. So in that case, we really need, and Susan and I talked about this, and we do think that whether it's for faculty or for students, it applies to both audiences, right? So for asynchronous, we need to decide on the communication tools, right? So the mentor and the mentee would have to decide, well, are we going to mostly use email? Or is there, are we going to use the LMS, right? At some cases, an institution might create a course shell or an organization where they would enroll, right, all of the mentors and mentees, and that will be the place for them to interact, right? Besides that, or any other kind of a forum. So like, for example, at CUNY, we have CUNY Commons, that's another platform that one may choose, or a similar platform of a kind. And specifically for asynchronous type of mentoring, it's extremely important to have structure and some kind of a schedule, right? So think about it this way. So if it's more of a formal mentoring program, then you'd probably have to decide that we're going to have, once a month check-in, right? And so that really, provides that accountability for both the online mentor and the online mentee. When it comes to synchronous, right, and specifically I want to focus on synchronous groups, right? So let's say that it's one mentor and, many mentees, for example. So in that setting, and that's the model, for example, that we use for our online mentoring program here at Lehman. So typically what's really important there is to have a set agenda, right? So it's like for any kind of a meeting, if there's no agenda, then you don't know what the outcome of that meeting might be.
Right.
So for mentoring, there needs to be a specific agenda. There needs to be protocols in terms of, how do we interact, how do we respond, making sure that mentees feel comfortable asking questions, that those questions and comments are welcome, and maybe even, they're able to contribute to the agenda for the next time you meet. Also, since it's a synchronous session, just like we're meeting today online, at times mentees might not be able to attend the meeting. So we need to make sure that the meeting is recorded, or in some cases, what I've seen, what Susan and I have seen done really well is if the meeting is not recorded, then there are very good notes that highlight specific topics that were brought up and shared with those who were not able to attend.
Yeah, we do, by the way, record all of this weekly interview series, and then we post them on our YouTube channel. So anyone who's watching and didn't have an opportunity to take notes, please go back to our CUNY SPS YouTube channel. You'll be able to see all of this. Perfect. Excellent. That's a very good recommendation. Now, Susan, let's switch gears slightly. The topic that is being in a lot of people's minds since November is ChatGPT and AI, and how artificial intelligence will transform all our lives and maybe take our jobs away. And we have heard all sorts of things regarding artificial intelligence, right? How students are using it to write essays, etc., etc. But specifically, as it relates to online mentoring, I'd like to get your take on how you think AI will be adopted more widely in higher education for mentoring in particular. You can talk about other areas, but specifically in online mentoring, how do you see AI evolving?
Well, let me say on a positive note, I could see AI eventually becoming a way to create resource, a interactive kind of resource for both mentors and mentees, to provide answers all to different kinds of questions, particularly maybe, ones involving technology. But also it could be about procedures, for people who are new to the institution. So just like we're using FAQ now and we have to put them together ourselves, or Googling for information, or how we create web resources based on our knowledge in a particular area. So I could see that might be a way that we can more readily put together uh, information eventually when we know that we're going to have to check it until we know that it's not coming up with garbage advice. I mean, these things really are. It goes back to the garbage in, garbage out, right?
Yeah.
Um, but in terms of mentoring specifically, I want to say beyond information, giving answers or information, mentoring is more than just giving information. Okay. It's a very high touch, it's a very personal interaction, even when it's one to many, where one person is mentoring a whole group or answering,
Yeah.
and making appointments and meeting with different people over a semester. Um, so it involves a relationship, and so I think that is extremely important. um, and until we get to the point where people think that they're t- that a bot equals that human relationship,
Right.
I
Right.
think that mentoring is a way that we really can humanize, bringing people into an
Yeah.
organization, helping them advance professionally, helping students succeed. Um, that maybe that kind of human interaction is going to be more and more valuable and prized in the future.
I agree. I think my take on the evolution of AI as it relates to higher education is that it is based on the level of interaction required. Mentoring, of course, as you said, it's a very personal one-on-one relationship, and it's very different from, say, advising, which could be probably provided at some scale, at some capacity, using artificial intelligence tools. For instance, I'm going to share on the screen. This is the link to the one of the latest bots. It was developed by Khan Academy, who you probably all know very well, and they developed this chatbot called Canmigo. I guess a play on Can and Amigo, by which they allow students to have a virtual advisor, as they're saying, completing a math problem. So, and I've seen it in action. It looks pretty robust, but it goes up to certain level, right? That's where you start to peel the onion. At some point, mentoring, I think, requires to be much deeper in that onion, in those layers, because of the subtleties of mentoring a faculty or a student. It's so multi-pronged. It has to do with career. It also has to do with interacting in your profession. It has to do with your institution, as we were saying earlier. There is a CUNY way of doing certain things, right? So learning from your mentors at CUNY in particular is critically important. So yeah, I think it will continue evolving, no doubt, and we'll be on the lookout for what tools are developed. Certainly, as I said, there is possibility for scalability and expanding services, but not without losing the human touch, which is so critical. So now I'd like to, of course, give you an opportunity to share a little bit about your most recent research and your most recent publications. You mentioned at the very beginning that you had written a book, and Susan, I think you have a copy of it. Maybe you can show it for our audience. And what's the title of the book?
Best practices for mentoring in online programs.
Exactly right. And it was published when? Last year or this year?
Yeah, it was published on September 7th, 2022. So it's very recent.
Very recent,
and
yeah.
One quick thing about the book, if you're interested to check it out, we divide the book in two parts. So essentially what we've done for the book, we, besides, doing the research, we have interviewed several, folks that do outstanding work in the United States from a variety of institutions, to really provide specific practical examples, right? So our book really helps you think about, what are the essential components of a mentoring program, and specifically focusing on online faculty and online students. And it really gives you practical advice on what you might need to consider, what are some of the key elements, what are the different types of mentoring that can take place, so that you're able to create a mentoring program that would meet your needs at your institution.
Fantastic. And I put on the screen a link on Amazon to the book. You can also get it on the site of the editor. And I'm going to show another link there as well. But while we do that, I just got a question actually from Carlos on the comment section. And he's asking, how do you measure the success and impact of online mentoring programs? Are there any key metrics you consider to evaluate the effectiveness of online mentorship? Great question, Carlos. So I don't know who would like to address it.
Susan, do you want to focus on faculty and I'll take the student part of it?
Sure. Okay. So, I think when you're assessing something, you have to go back, well, what is the purpose and goal? What are the objectives of that program, right? That's what you have to assess it in terms of. So if it's a program in online mentoring for faculty, which is designed to help them, let's say, throughout their first semester of teaching online, which is how the peer mentoring program at CUNY SBS was designed originally. So if it's, a semester-long program, for example, so then you're going to want to look at measures of satisfaction from the faculty. Did it help them during their semester of teaching? If it was a program that was designed to, as part of the initial training, did it help them get up and running? Were they able to establish their class? If it involved course design, did it enable them to quickly have an effective course design? So you're going to be wanting to look at how will you assess those particular aspects that apply to the goals of the program. So that's one of the things. Another thing is you might be looking at persistence and retention of faculty, for example, in terms of online teaching, those who want to continue after being mentored versus those that didn't get mentored. Now, you can only do that at a certain stage in your online programs. But so again, what's the purpose of the mentoring program? And you have to come up with ways of assessing based on what your particular goals are.
Excellent.
Yeah, and it's very similar for the online students as well, in that sense that I'll give you one specific example. For our online student mentoring program at Lehman, we started with a couple of hundred students, and then we scaled up to over 9,000 students. So where we are serving specifically students, originally we started with those who were taking their first online class at Lehman, and then we really open it up to all online students taking at least one online class. And so the idea there is, really focusing on retention and making sure that students, their grades are up to par. And so really looking at that data, but also looking at, the types of different services that we offer through mentoring. We offer a kind of an orientation, and then we offer one-on-one appointments. So we're looking at the data to see how many of our students end up utilizing the service, how many follow up with an email, how many show up to a one-on-one appointment. And then for our mentoring for faculty program, for example, Susan oversees that program. And what we do there as well is faculty mentors, they produce a log and then a report at the end. They as part of really documenting how many mentees they've been in touch with, what kind of services they offered, what type of technology or the topic that they've consulted them on. So that's also part of the report, and that really helps us at the end of the semester look back at some of the data and really make decisions about how do we want to move forward and what support do we need to provide to our mentors as well in order for them to succeed.
Fantastic. So thank you so very much for answering that question. Very good question from Carlos. As usual, we run out of time very quickly. That half hour went like that. But before we conclude, I would like to share with our audience your preference. If anyone wants to get in touch or contact you, what's the best way to do so? I imagine via email. Is that correct?
Yes, via our Lehman email addresses.
Great. So I'm going to show first Susan's email, susan.co@lehman.cuny.edu, and Alina's email, same format, olina.sadko, zhadko@lehman.cuny.edu. So again, thank you so very much. This has been wonderful, very, very illuminating. I thank both of you for participating, and I look forward to a follow-up because we always, as I said, run out of time, many topics still to be discussed. So look forward to having a follow-up and a part 2 on our conversation.
Thank
and to
you,
the
Joe.
audience, thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks
Thank
to everyone
you.
for coming.
Take care.